Hello everyone, this is a video for chapter 3. Wanted to go through this week. We're actually going to be covering, you'll have 2 discussion boards, 2 chapters, and also I'll ask that you go ahead and post the information for your observation site on the discussion board. There's a discussion board section specifically for this. To do this, you'll need to make sure and put down the school district you're teaching, that you're going to be observing at. Different buildings, so that's fine. Go ahead and put your buildings down, and your regular education teacher and your special education teacher's name. Make sure and also let me know which one is the regular ed teacher and which one's the special ed teacher, and then also their emails will need to be given to me. Go from there. And if you are having trouble with getting your observation sites, make sure and get with me. Wait. I've already asked for, if anybody is around the Warrensburg area and wanting to find out, wanting to observe there, I've asked that you go ahead and let me know. I've heard from one student, so I'm going to get that going, and hopefully by the time you read this this email, that student knows where they're observing, and or at least who to contact for that. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 3. It is the Collaborating with Families chapter, which I do believe is probably the most important section. I know you're all here about learning more about the different disabilities and the different disability categories and things like that. But really, to be truthful, as a teacher, you can't have a better person to have on your side than the student's family. And so this chapter will give you an idea of what that's all about. Let's see here. I did put a slide in with the video on the homework for this week just to verify, but there's no changes from what's on your sheet. The objectives for this chapter: identified 3 factors that contribute to increased emphasis on parent and family involvement. Describe challenges and characteristics and roles of families of children with disabilities. Describe the 5 principles of effective communication between educators and parents, and explain attitudes and behaviors that can create barriers. And those are the key ones there. There's a few more though. Examine cultural backgrounds, beliefs, and linguistic practices that can impede parent involvement, and identify ways that school personnel and can help families understand school culture, policies, and practices. In this day and age, most towns have multiple different cultural backgrounds of families that live within the district. So when you're looking at different cultures, you're looking at different ways that they view not only education, but also professionals in general, and things like that. So it's very important that you have an understanding of the family culture and dynamics. List 10 guidelines for communicating with parents of children with disabilities, and contrast several common modes of homeschool communication. This is another key point that as a teacher, you'll want to find out what is your best method to communicate with families about what their students doing, and this will vary depending on the age level and grade level that you're teaching. And discuss strategies for engaging parents of children with disabilities in the education of and support of one another. Parents want to be involved in their child's education. They're important catalysts to 94-142. Educational effectiveness is enhanced when parents and families are involved. They have been the one that knows their child and lives with their child the most at this point in time. So they're the best person to go to. They're your best resource to go to when you're having some problems, difficulties in helping to educate their son or daughter in your classroom. And repeated research and practice demonstrates the benefits when parents are involved. And also the law. The law requires that you have collaboration with parent. In IDEA, parent involvement is a key component to students' academic success. Parents and families are natural, necessary allies to educators. Families know certain aspects of their children better than anyone else. And parents can provide the extra skill practice and teach their children new skills in the home and community, especially as you're working through transition. For students, they're the ones that can make sure that they're learning, continuing learning what you're trying to teach them, whether it be about cooking, whether it be about chores, whether it be about self-help skills, hygiene, whatever it may be. The parents can be your best resource and your best guide to helping the student continue to learn that at home, in their environment, and also the other way around. There are times when you're working with what we'll call later on an IFSP, which are IEPs for students that are before school, and we'll talk about that later on when we talk about ECSE. But in those type of IEPs, the family is included in that, and what they need help with is something that you can help with also. That will be a collaborative effort to making sure that the student is continuing to grow and learn. Parents have the greatest vested interest in seeing their child learn as they are constant in the child's life, and they also must live with the outcomes of decisions made by IEP teams all day and every day. So it's great to have them as a beginning person to help you as you're developing that IEP. Can help give you some ideas of how to help and what needs to be done with that student to help them with their IEP goals and help get IEP goals. Benefits of parent involvement: increased likelihood of targeting meaningful IEP goals, especially if they feel they're involved. Just like anyone else, if they don't feel they're involved in the process, you may have difficulty helping them help you with meeting those goals. Greater consistency and support in home and school environments, and increased opportunities for learning and development and access to expanded resources and services. Many times families will come to you and they'll already be involved with agencies in the community because of going to their doctors and getting an idea of who can help them. And so getting an understanding of what agencies already work with the family and in turn the student can help you with inviting agencies to the IEP meeting that might be beneficial to coming up with not only goals but coming up with ideas of how they could help, because many agencies will have different supports that they might be able to assist the IEP team. Family response to a child with disabilities. First of all, the different feelings. Many times, especially in elementary years, you will be the first IEP team. You will be the first IEP involved with the family after you've determined that that student has a disability. And so they will go through some shock, denial, and disbelief in different stages. They'll have anger, they'll have guilt and depression, shame, possibly lowered self-esteem, also rejection of the child and overprotectiveness. They'll have a lot of these different feelings as they go through. And then also acceptance, adaptation, and appreciation. Each child with a disability has their own key strengths and attributes. And sometimes it's harder for some to come up with those, or they develop them later on rather than early on. So, but this is the different responses those families will go to, and you'll be the one that will be able to help them through those processes. Some districts also have a family group component where you might be able to get a hold of another parent in your district that has a child with a disability. It might be the same disability or it might be another disability, but they might help them through some of these feelings, process these feelings. So that was one that the text talks about. There's 5 stages. You've got identification of the disability, you've got self-education, you've got reflection about self and family, and then advocacy and empowerment, and then the stage 5, appreciation and enlightenment. So going through that. And it's based on the following. Parents and family members are the best source of knowledge about their child, their own strengths and needs. Resilience may not be, but should be identified and supported. And parents are engaged in a continuous adjustment process that can be facilitated by sensitive and caring individuals as they're going through the process of those stages we talked about. And the roles. And I want you to understand, this is one I think a lot of times, especially young teachers as they're looking at family, don't understand the different roles that the exceptional parent has in life. Or you may be a new parent now, looking at different roles you have. But I'm going to start going through the next few slides, and I think you'll understand how overwhelming this could be, and the need for a good person to have on their side is you helping them through some of this also, and giving them some supports, whether it be through the district or out of district supports, to help them understand. But caregiver, additional needs of exceptional child, provider, additional needs often create a financial burden. Teacher, exceptional children often need more teaching to acquire skills. Counselor, they must often help their child cope with the disability. Behavior support specialists, some have to become skilled behavior managers. So in a case where you've got a student that is on your caseload, or you're looking at their IEP and they've had some behavioral concerns in the past, one, to see what has worked, what hasn't worked, what are they working on now, what are they having difficulties with now, and you can help come up with a plan or some ideas to help them. Parent of siblings without disabilities, meet the needs of other children too. At times siblings can be jealous because it can look like and feel like the sibling with a disability is getting more attention because of the different doctor's appointments and the different things that they're doing with the other child. And also the marriage partner. Having a child with disabilities can put a stress on the marriage. It seems like, I don't know if it's any more than what any other student might be, but it seems like there are several divorce cases that you're working with. So you've got parents that are not living with the child, and the child's going one place on the weekends, or maybe one night going to this parent, one night going to the next, and there is only one IEP meeting. I've had that question before, parents don't get along. Well, that may be, but you don't have multiple IEP meetings for one child. You'll end up going back and forth, and they just need to realize that there would be one IEP meeting, and they need to get along in the IEP meeting, because that is what for the child, and it will benefit the IEP team and the child if both parents can be there and both parents have a voice in their IEP. Some other ones that are roles: information specialists must ensure that others appropriately support their child's dignity and acceptance, and an advocate for effective educational services and opportunities. Child and family have changing needs as children grow also, so as they get older, there will be more needs along with that. Professional partnership, relationship in which families, not just parents and professionals, agree to build on each other's expertise and resources as appropriate for the purpose of making and implementing decisions that will directly benefit the students and indirectly benefit other family members and professionals. Effective homeschool partnerships are characterized by family members and professionals jointly pursuing shared goals in a climate of mutual respect and trust. Depending on the dynamics of the family, they're going to see you as the educational professional. You know the education part. For the most part, you're the one that's the expert on the IEP and the expert on things involving the IEP. But they're also an expert. They're an expert on their child. They're probably more of an expert on, depending on the age and amount of time they've had to work with their child with a special need or with a disability. They may also be the expert in their particular disability their child has, whether they're ADHD or whether they're autistic or whether they have Down syndrome or CP. They may be the expert there, and so you need to make sure and collaborate with that knowledge that you may not be the expert in some of the cases, and that's the case in many teams. There's always people that you bring into the team because they're experts in certain areas. So do not discount the fact that the family is expert of their child also. Effective rules of communication. Accept parents' statement. Respect parents' point of view. Make sure that they understand that you respect their point of view and you respect their input, because all of us want to have that done. So make sure and put that across. Listen actively. Respond to parents with interest and animation. To me, this is just common respect of anybody you're talking to. Question effectively. Speak. If you ask yes or no questions, that's what you're going to get, just yes or no answers. But if you ask open-ended questions, you're going to get a whole bunch of new information that's going to help you better work with the family, better work with the student, and better make an effective IEP and effective goals. Encourage. Describe and show parents their child's improving performance. Many times I've seen IEPs, they tend to be the negative. Because many times when you're looking at reasons why a student has an IEP is because they can't do some component or some part of working with you and the educational process. So make sure that you are concentrating also on their positive. What can they do? Who wants to be in a meeting for over 12 years that all you do is come to the meeting and hear what you didn't do well and what you can't do? That's why I think many parents, when you start getting into the middle school, high school area, many parents start not attending their IEPs and not being as involved. And this, to me, is a critical component. This is when you're going to start handing off the student to other agencies, Voc Rehab, and places like that. And you need parent support. You need parent input and parent active participation in that IEP at that point. And stay focused. Focus on the child's educational program and processes. As you get groups together, things will come up, meeting will get off task. You need to concentrate and stay focused on what is at hand with that student at that point in time. Professional roadblocks to communication. Treating parents as vulnerable clients instead of equal partners. Now, I will say, there have been times in my educational experience that parents many times will have disabilities too and may not understand what it is that you're talking about. So you may have to explain in different ways, just like you would your students. But remember, they need to be treated as equal partners in this IEP process. Keeping professional distance. Yes, you may have some that have been in the same church, or you may have even grown up with them. Many of you may end up teaching in your same hometown, so you may know them personally. But make sure and keep that professional distance also. You need to be professional in these IEP meetings and make sure that you're concentrating on what needs to be done. And treating parents as if they need counseling. That's not your part. Yes, you can give them ideas. You can give them some ways to get support. As we talked about, families have a lot of roles and they need to have some guidance. But that probably is not you. You're probably not the expert in that particular place. And then blaming parents for their child's disability. This, to me, is old school here. We'll start talking about, when we start talking about autism, that they felt that was one of the primary reasons students had autism way back when was due to parents. That's not the case. Don't blame the parent for the child's disability. And don't let them do that to themselves either. Disrespecting parents is less intelligent. I've seen this too, and it's not a good way to start an IEP process or that relationship, that professional relationship between the parents. They are intelligent. They are, in their own way, experts, so treat them as such. And then sometimes treating parents as adversaries. And I know at times this can be tough. You will have those parents that are tough parents to get along with in this IEP relationship. But you can't let that come through. You need to be professional. You're working for the betterment of their child, your student. And you can't do this if you treat your parents as adversaries. And then labeling parents. Talks about that in this chapter too. Conflict resolution. Dialoguing is an approach to conflict resolution in which both parties try to see each other's point of view. You're not always going to see that they agree with everything you say, and you're not going to agree with everything they say. But you can't have an adversarial approach. You need to have a dialoguing approach so that you can listen to why they're thinking and what they're thinking and where they're getting their thoughts from, and then come to an agreement. Now, there will be some things that, as the educational expert, that you're going to have to agree to disagree, but this is how we need to do it. But you need to make sure that dialoguing is done. Difference between dialogue and an argument. Object of an argument is to win. The object of a dialogue is to gain information. The arguer tells and the dialoguer asks. And the arguer tries to persuade where the dialoguer seeks to learn. So make sure this would be one of the key components to learn, because I think at times we may go in starting out as an arguer and not really realize that. But as you look through these components, I think you can probably see that the difference. The arguer tries to convince where the dialoguer wants to discover. And the arguer sees two opposing views and believes hers is a valid one, or his is the valid and best one, where the dialoguer is willing to understand multiple viewpoints. Conflict resolution. There's the rerun approach, which is reflect, explain, reason, understand, and negotiate. And I'd make sure that you look at that a little bit in the book. It'll definitely be on parts of the upcoming quiz. Cultural diverse family. Many are English language learners, and many live in poverty. They have funds, and undocumented immigrants are naturally fearful of interaction with anyone representing authority, and many tend to be family oriented. So, as you're looking at different cultures, you need to make sure that you have an understanding of how their culture reacts. I had one family that I'd like to kind of discuss a little bit now. I've been working with this family for a couple years, and in the home they were Hispanic-speaking family, but their son or daughter, when they came to school here, she spoke English, and but she was also bilingual, so she of course knew the Hispanic language the family was using in the home. And for the first 2 years, I'd invite the family in. They were very courteous, very nice, very happy. Didn't generally have much to add. They were just kind of yes and okay, and they were fine to work with. But it had a little change when I had a counselor came into the school district that was fluent in Spanish, which is generally speaking, what the family spoke. And I asked him to come in and be with me when I called them to set up the meeting. And that way, if they had questions, he could converse and translate. And then in the meeting, he was there and he was able to translate to the parents. Because in the past, it would be the student that would tend to translate what we were talking about. And I tell you what, you saw totally... I felt like after this, the family realized that they were just as much of an expert, and I did want their opinion, where maybe before they didn't really realize that. So anyway, make sure that you're looking at who your resources are, and if you do have a family that does not speak English in the home, that you look for opportunities within your district that might be able to help you with this IEP meeting. Disability, including causes and treatment. There are some cultural backgrounds that may feel like the reason, that their child or grandson or daughter has a disability is bad, and they're looked down upon then at that point, and things like that. So you make sure and understand their cultural differences, even in the view of just having a disability. Many had a negative education system, may be intimidating to the family. So make sure that you're speaking in terms that they can understand. A lot of times we as educators, we start utilizing those ADHD, IEP, all those words, all those letters put together, and families may not understand what you're really talking about. So make sure that you do your best to talk at a level that they can understand and be respectful of it. Cultural reciprocity. Educators should work towards cultural reciprocity. Understanding how different values and belief systems may influence families' perspectives, wishes, and decisions requires careful examination of professionals' cultural background and belief systems. In high school and middle school, when you're starting to look at transition and what the child wants to do. In many cultures, just like in our culture early on, what the family's job is what was expected of their children. If the family was a farming family, then guess what? Those children were farmers, and they learned farming, and that was just an expectation. If they were a storekeeper, then that's what they learned as they grew up. They grew up in that learning that business so that they would take over, and that's just how it was. Well, nowadays, when it's not as much anymore as a U.S., but in other cultures, it's still very much there. And been working with many cultures where the students wanted to go into this different background, but the parent was and the family was very reluctant because that's not what their culture believed in. And so you need to understand the family dynamic and the cultural dynamic that goes into play. Requires careful examination of professionals' cultural background and belief systems. Face-to-face communication, and quite regularly. So make sure and look at how you set those up. And this is a very good idea to help you get going with that. Preparing for the conference. Conducting the conference. Build rapport. Obtain information from the family. Use those open-ended questions. Provide information from the school background, from the school point of view, and then summarize and follow up at the end of that. So summarize what your meeting was about, and then make sure and follow up. If there was something that you were doing and said you were going to, make sure you follow up with the family, a week or two later when you get that taken care of. And if it's going to take longer than a week or two, still follow up with the family so that they know, yes, you remembered what you talked to them about, but it's taking a little bit longer, but you wanted to give them an update on where you were. And video sharing is another option the book talks about. So make sure and look at that section. Written communication. We talked about this in the objectives. Teachers should never rely on written messages as sole method of communication. Guess what? We were kids, students once too. We remember some of those notes that came home from teacher. They may not have made it to the parents exactly on time or never, and then all of a sudden the parent and teacher had a conversation by phone, and then your parents found out that there was a piece of paper that you were supposed to give them and didn't. I realize that as it happened to me. So here are some examples. You've got happygrams and special accomplishment letters, two-way homeschool reporting forms, dialogue notebooks, homeschool contracts, class newsletters and websites, email and text messaging. I'm going to also add one to this. My first year was working with students that had, at that point, behavior disorder, now it's ED, in a self-contained classroom. And the first few weeks as I was calling parents to introduce myself and set them up for meetings, I'd get a common theme coming back to me. What did Johnny or what did Sarah do? They were so used to getting calls only for those negative things that it was very hard for me as a teacher to kind of start creating that relationship. So what I ended up doing is I took that red notebook red grade book that most of you still get as starting teachers, and each year you'll probably get one. And I used one of those sections for my communication log, so to speak. And I made sure that each month I had contact with parents at least 2 or 3 times on a good thing that happened, on the good things that the student was doing, on a great accomplishment that they did. And I'd make sure and mark that. And I'd use highlighters, that green for good and of course red for bad, it's easy. And then if I did have contact on a negative, I'd mark it in red so that I kept track and made sure. And it was amazing. After only about a month of doing this, in that second month, I had a lot more parents that were being a lot more cordial on the phone. Their first question wasn't, okay, what did Sarah or what did Johnny do? It was, how are you doing? And then I can start creating that relationship. And it was amazing how that can change. And because then they do feel like you are not an adversary, but you are a person that is right along with them in trying to help their child succeed in life and also in school. Phone calls. Regular phone calls can be an effective and efficient way to maintain homeschool communication. Voicemail and hotlines. Parents can call and listen at their convenience. Some schools have this set up with websites the way they are now. A lot of schools will have web pages set up for certain teachers, and they can get online and see what their students are doing. They can get homework online and understand what was given. Some teachers even will use videos so that they can videotape some things and talk about that on there. So it's really come a long way since I was in school, but probably even since you were in school. Other forms of parent communication. You've got parents as tutors. It talks about systematically teaching self-help and daily skills to their children. Parent education and support groups, providing education for parenting. We talked about that a little earlier. Parent-to-parent groups, providing help to parents of children with special needs, become reliable allies for one another. Talked about that. Parents as research partners, assist researchers in knowing if their ideas and findings have validity. That happens too, but also it can happen as a teacher parent too. If a parent is looking over different ideas, different ways, they may be a great benefit for you too, because you have many disabilities that you will be working with in your teaching lifetime, where the parent, they have one or two child maybe with disabilities, and they're going to become the expert on their child's disability over time because they're going to do that research. If there's a problem, just like us, they're going to Google it, and they're going to find out how to work that out. There's also the mirror model, based on the assumption that parents have a great deal to offer as well as need to receive services from special educators. Top half of the model assumes that professionals have certain information, knowledge, and skills to share with parents to help them with their children, whereas the bottom half of the model assumes that parents have information, knowledge, and skills that can help professionals and be more effective in educating their children. So really, take this chapter to heart. The other thing I want to discuss is let me get these off of here, the online section. Let me go ahead and just go to chapter 3. There's a self-study, chapter 3 discussion required. There's a folder in with chapter 3. And if you click that, it will go to the directions. But you will go to, and there's a click here portion, will take you right to the link, Transition Coalition website. It's a great website. A lot of schools utilize it for professional development. For teachers, so it's definitely there and proven. But there's a family module for this website that I want you to do. It's a free site. You will need to create a login, but it's free. And I remember, when you get done with the module, remember, and I'll say this again, to make sure and save your certificate, and then post it to your discussion board so that I can have verification that you did do all of the module. But I'm going to click here so I can make sure and kind of take you through there, because that way it's there. It's coming up now. But you'll go in and you'll create an account, and then I would go ahead and remember me once you get that account, and then you can log in and get that going. And you're going to see a lot of information here. If you've done some before, you'll see your previous modules. But what I'm going to do is you'll go to training, and you'll see modules there. I'll go ahead and go towards modules. And then as you scroll down there, working with families is the very last one. Don't know why. I think it ought to be the first one. But anyway, you'll click that, and then you will start going through this module. It'll give you some explanations, some learning objectives. It'll probably take you a couple hours depending on how fast you are at reading. But take it and you can do it over multiple days. You can save it and come back to it. But you'll have 3 different sessions, so make sure and start it early, and then go ahead and do the discussion board after that. I'm going to go ahead and go to the discussion board there. There we go. There's chapter 3. From the chapter 3 activity, post comments, responding to peers' posts is also responding to posts. Give 3 items you learned about when completing the Working for Families module on the Transition Coalition website. So you'll need to pick out 3 items and post it to the website. I will give you a little bit of time on this, so you might want to look at chapter 9's post on deafness and go through it first. And then come back and post this activity maybe Thursday to give you some time, because it will take you a couple hours. So get it done, but you need to do one of your posts by Wednesday night. The other one can be Thursday, your initial post anyway. And then comment to your peers. So go ahead and get that taken care of. I'll take the opportunity now to go up and look at your observation site post. It's right above there. Make sure that you give me the information of where you are observing. You need to give me the school district name, the buildings you'll be observing in, And the teachers you'll be observing, there'll be two different teachers. One will be a regular ed teacher, in which you'll have a regular education class, along with students that have disabilities in that class also. In other words, it's not a complete class with kids with disabilities. You'll observe those. And then you'll have a special education teacher where you will observe their special education class, and these are students with disabilities, and you'll observe their class also. Make sure if you have questions, what I'm going to try to do this session to try to help out a little bit is make sure and give me, as you get your posts done and as you get your background checks done, then I'll go ahead and ask that you give me a call after you've observed, looked at the folder for observation to make sure that you totally understand all aspects of that observation component. So that does that, and then you'll have your quiz to take over the different ones also, so make sure and take your quiz. I think that is all I need to do. Let me double check here. I think that is it. So you all have a great week. I will be doing the next chapter's video later on this weekend. Make sure you're getting your postings done. Yesterday there were a few people that still hadn't done their first initial post, which should have been done by Wednesday evening. Today should be going in today, tomorrow, and Sunday, getting some posts to your peers and getting some feedback to them, and also responding to the people that have responded to you, just like you would in a classroom environment. So have fun, and I'll talk to you next week.